Oh, hey! So this is going to be video 3 of my Labor Theory of Value series, which I think is a really valuable theory for all working people to understand. And this has to do with the second problem that I was talking about in the last video. And this problem I would like to call the secretary's problem. So look, if you've ever worked for a large enough firm, large enough company, then one of the things that you learned right off the bat was the importance of what? Making friends with the secretary. You definitely want to make friends with the secretary. You make friends with the secretary and the world becomes your oyster. There's a whole avenues of possibilities open up for you, right? The secretary is important. The secretary has the books. The secretary has the time off schedule. The secretary has the payroll. The secretary has the file room. The secretary has the supply room. The secretary has access to the big boss, right? So you make friends with the secretary and you are in. In fact, if the secretary doesn't like you, shame on you. Your career at that firm is probably going to be pretty miserable, right? The secretary is really important. Well, wait a minute. How can the secretary be that important? I mean, the secretary doesn't actually do anything that directly adds value to the company, right? The secretary is not on the floor making the widgets. The secretary is not providing the service that the company makes money from. In fact, from the point of view of the bosses, the secretary is an expense. So doesn't that throw a wrench in my whole idea of the labor theory of value? No. And here's why. If you go back to my original caveat, if you work for a big enough firm, you're going to have lots of people like secretaries, HR people, managers, janitors, physical plant specialists. There's going to be all kinds of people who are working for that company who don't directly add value to the company. So why are they there? Well, let's try to shrink this down. Let's say you work for a small company. Let's say you work for a mom and pop sandwich shop. You're working for a mom and pop sandwich shop. You're the only employee, right? You and mom and pop are probably there making the sandwiches, right? You're all adding value to the good, to the sandwiches, and you're all contributing to the income of the company in equal ways. But mom and pop want to expand. They got to hire more people. Maybe mom and pop want to keep their shop open 10 hours a day, which basically means there's about 12 hours worth of time that you have to spend in the shop to prep and then clean up afterwards. That takes a toll. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. You might want to hire people to oversee this. Before you know it, mom or pop, let's say mom is probably taking that old broom closet and converted it into a little office, and mom is sifting through papers. What's mom doing? Well, what mom is doing is she's trying to deal with the frictions that happen when you hire more employees. You hire more employees, and it's harder to coordinate all of the actions of those employees. It also means that you need access to more resources. You have to have room. You have to provide breaks. You have to buy toilet paper, paper towels, soap. There's all kinds of things that get added to the firm now that are burdensome, that are what we call friction points in the firm. So now mom, instead of making sandwiches and actually adding value to the company, mom has to find ways to smooth out those friction points. Now, let's say mom and pop decide that they've got enough business, they can open another sandwich shop across town. Well, now that adds a whole nother layer of complication to the business. And the bigger their business gets, the more employees that they're going to hire who are directly adding value, the more people they're going to have to hire in order to deal with those friction points. So that's exactly what the secretary does. The secretary deals with those friction points in the firm, in the business, and adds efficiencies. These efficiencies make it possible for the firm to scale up. In other words, because of the secretaries and because of the HR people and because of the managers, the firm is able to hire more people who actually do contribute directly to the income of the company, who are providing the goods and the services. Without those secretaries, without those HR people, without those managers, there's natural limits to how big a firm can grow. So the secretary makes it possible for the firm to grow, to scale up, and to bring in more surplus value. The secretary is contributing to the increased value, but not directly. She's doing it indirectly, which makes it a little bit more difficult to truly calculate the value that's being added by the secretary. It's possible to calculate that. But the same rules do apply to the secretary. The secretary is not going to be paid the equivalent of the extra value that can now be brought into the firm because it now has a secretary. The secretary is going to be paid less than the value that is added because of her. Otherwise, she wouldn't be hired. And the same rule applies. The less the company can get away with paying the secretary, the more surplus value gets claimed by the owner. Now, there's an alternative argument to this, right? The alternative argument is the more money that the owner can make from expanding their company means more jobs. It also means as the company grows, they need more people with higher levels of education, which means more, that translates to more pay. So a company that is large enough is able to now make the claim that they're bringing in higher paying jobs, even though in every one of those instances, the folks that are being paid for those jobs, even though they're being paid well, are not being paid the equivalent of the value that they are adding, right? So the argument can go both ways. But either way, it's still the existence of these non-productive employees still confirms the validity of the labor theory of value.